It was snowing the night my life ended at 17. The kind of snow that makes the whole world quiet except for the sound of my father screaming, "You've shamed this house." I remember the smell of burnt candles from our Sunday service still clinging to my jacket. My mom stood behind him, her face blank like I was already dead. They didn't care that I was shaking, that my hands were holding my belly, or that I was begging for one more night inside. My father opened the door, pointed to the cold and said, "You're not our daughter anymore." That was the last sentence I ever heard from him. When the door slammed, it wasn't just a sound, it was the sound of my world being erased. I stepped into the snow barefoot, holding a plastic grocery bag with my school books and a half-eaten sandwich. My phone buzzed once. Ryan Coleman. "I can't deal with this. Don't call me again." That message broke me more than the cold ever could. I wandered to the edge of Cedar Falls, Ohio, past the glowing windows of families having dinner, something I used to be part of. I sat at a bus stop, pressing my coat against my belly, whispering to the tiny heartbeat inside me, "It's okay, baby. We'll make it somehow." You know that moment when the world decides you're worthless and you have to decide if it's right? That was me that night. Every breath felt like a goodbye to the girl I used to be. A car passed, splashing slush onto my jeans. I didn't even flinch. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe you don't deserve to be loved." But then I felt it, a faint kick. That small movement inside me was louder than my father's words. It said, "You're not done." I looked up at the sky, snowflakes melting on my face, and I made a promise. One day, they'll remember the name they tried to erase. Nah, that's where my story begins, not with love, not with family, but with exile. And if you're listening right now, maybe you've had a door slammed on you too. Maybe someone decided you weren't worth staying for. If you've ever stood in the cold, alone, wondering if your story still matters, you're the reason I'm telling mine. Because every view, every comment, every person who stays till the end of my story, you prove something the world forgot. That pain doesn't silence us, it connects us. If you were me that night, would you have knocked again or walked away forever? Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to Revenge House USA and stand with me as I turn that night of rejection into a lifetime of power. The first night on the street, I learned what silence really sounds like. It wasn't peace, it was punishment. I curled up on a metal bench outside a bus station, hugging my stomach to keep the warmth inside. Every gust of wind felt like it was carving my name out of existence. I counted the buses passing by, pretending each one was taking me somewhere safer, but none of them stopped for me. By sunrise, my shoes were soaked, my fingers numb, and my pride gone. I walked into a diner when it opened, just to feel heat again. The waitress looked me up and down, then at my belly. I waited for the words I'd heard all week. "We can't help you." But instead, she sighed and said, "Sit down, honey. Coffee's on me." Her name was Gloria Hendricks, the first person to see me as human after my own parents didn't. I washed dishes in the back for a plate of scrambled eggs. That food tasted like mercy. Still, nights were brutal. Some days, I hid in a 24-hour laundromat just to stay warm. The hum of dryers drowned out the sound of my heartbeat. I watched families walk in, arguing about lost socks, and thought, at least they have someone to argue with. At 5 months pregnant, I fainted behind the diner's counter. When I woke up, Gloria was sitting beside me, holding my hand. "You need real help, sweetheart," she said, brushing my hair from my face. "You can't keep doing this alone." I wanted to say I don't have anyone, but the words stuck in my throat. She drove me to a community shelter in Columbus, run by a retired nurse named Martha Levine. The smell of clean sheets and warm soup hit me the moment I walked in, and for the first time in months, I cried not from pain, but from relief. Martha took my hand, pressed it gently against my stomach, and whispered, "Don't give up, Alina. That child isn't your mistake. He's your reason." That sentence became my prayer. The next weeks were hard. I scrubbed floors at a gas station for tips, cleaned motel bathrooms, and went to the shelter's evening classes to finish my GED. Some nights, I wanted to disappear. But then, in the middle of everything, the fear, the hunger, the shame, I'd feel a kick. A small reminder, Keep going, Mama. I'm still here. You see, people think rock bottom is a dead end. But standing there, freezing and alone, I realized it's actually a doorway. It's where you stop begging the world to love you and start learning to love yourself. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt abandoned, please know your story isn't over just because someone walked away. Every viewer who stays, who listens, who comments, you are proof that even broken stories deserve to be heard. They say hope doesn't knock, it shows up when you least expect it. For me, it came wearing an old cardigan and a smile that felt like sunlight after 1,000 cold nights. Her name was Martha Levine. She ran a small community shelter in Columbus, nothing fancy, just 10 bunk beds, peeling paint, and the smell of tomato soup. But to me, it was a palace. I still remember the first night I slept there. I pressed my face into the thin pillow and whispered, "We made it, baby. We're safe." Martha had this way of looking at people that made you feel seen, even when you were invisible to everyone else. She used to say, "Every scar has a story, Alina, and if you're still breathing, yours isn't done yet." I started helping her around the shelter, washing dishes, cleaning floors, teaching other girls how to write resumes. Most of them were like me, too young, too scared, too forgotten. We formed a quiet sisterhood built on pain and survival. One night, while folding donated clothes, Martha asked, "Have you thought about your future, sweetheart?" I laughed. "Future? I'm just trying to make it through the week." She smiled softly. "Then let's start there." She introduced me to a local adult school program. I took my GED test sitting next to women twice my age. Mothers, widows, survivors. When they called my name and handed me that certificate, it felt like I'd just taken my first breath in years. Then came the hardest part, giving birth. It was a cold morning in February. The power went out during labor, and I screamed into the darkness, gripping Martha's hand. When I heard that tiny cry, I broke down. All the rejection, all the loneliness, it vanished in a single heartbeat. I named him Liam Crawford. My son, my reason. In the weeks that followed, Martha became like the grandmother I never had. She helped me apply for state aid, found a small apartment, even bought me a used stroller from a thrift store. Every act of kindness stitched another piece of my heart back together. But she gave me something far greater than food or shelter. She gave me a sentence that would shape the rest of my life. "You don't have to be rich to rebuild your life, Alina. You just have to stop believing you're broken." That night, I looked at Liam sleeping beside me and made a new promise. I'll make sure you never feel unwanted. And one day, I'll stand tall enough that the world can't pretend we never existed. Not to. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the victim in me started to die and the fighter was born. And if you're still here, still watching, maybe it's because you've been there too. Maybe you know what it feels like when one stranger's kindness saves your whole story. When Liam turned 1, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, holding him on my hip, both of us reflected in the cracked glass. My hair was unkempt, my eyes hollow, but there was something new in that reflection. A fire. I wasn't the terrified girl who'd begged her father to let her stay. I was a mother now, and mothers don't quit. The world still saw me as fragile, disposable. When I applied for jobs, people's eyes always dropped to the single mother box. No one wanted to take a chance on someone like me until I met Mr. Hanley, a weary attorney who ran a tiny legal aid office downtown. He let me clean the office at night in exchange for a desk where I could study during the day. Every night I'd file papers and wipe coffee stains while Liam slept in a playpen by my desk. But when the lights dimmed, I'd open law textbooks Martha found for me at a used bookstore. I studied case after case, women abandoned, denied justice, told they were nothing. Each story burned like gasoline inside me. One evening, Mr. Hanley found me highlighting a chapter on family rights. He didn't scold me, he smiled. "You've got the look of someone who's been on the losing side," he said. "That's exactly who makes the best lawyers." That night, I realized something powerful. I didn't just want survival, I wanted justice. For 3 years, I worked days, studied nights, and raised Liam with every ounce of strength I had. When he'd toddle to my chair and tug my sleeve, I'd whisper, "Mommy's building our tomorrow, baby." At 27, I walked across the stage in a second-hand suit to receive my bachelor's degree in paralegal studies. The applause was faint, but in my ears, it sounded like thunder. After graduation, I applied to Ohio State Law School, and when that acceptance letter arrived, I sank to the floor, clutching it like a lifeline. Liam climbed onto my lap and pressed his tiny hand against my face. "Mommy's happy?" he asked. I laughed through tears. "Mommy's winning." Law school was brutal. I was older than most students, always tired, always late. But every time I thought I couldn't go on, I remembered the snow that night my parents threw me out, and I kept walking. There were days when my rent was late, my car broke down, or Liam got sick the week before finals, but failure wasn't an option. The girl who once begged for shelter had turned her pain into purpose. And if you're watching this, maybe you've had your own night in the cold, your own mountain no one thought you'd climb. But look at you. You're still here. That means your story's still being written. By the time I turned 35, my name was printed on the glass door of my own law firm, Crawford and Grace Family Law and Justice Advocacy. Every time I walked past that door, I remembered the girl who once stood in the snow, barefoot and pregnant, praying for one kind face. That girl was gone, but I carried her inside me, like a scar that no longer hurt but reminded me why I fought. The firm started small, just me, one assistant, and a flickering coffee machine. We handled the cases no one else wanted. Women fighting for custody, mothers escaping abuse, kids lost in a system that never listened. My first client hugged me so tight after her trial that I cried in the courthouse hallway. She whispered, "You believed me when nobody did." That's when I realized. This was my revenge turning pain into power. Liam was 15 then, tall and gentle, with his father's eyes but none of his cowardice. He'd wait up for me every night, reheating leftovers, asking about my cases like a grown man. Once, I caught him reading one of my law books and teasing, "Maybe I'll be your partner one day." I smiled. "Maybe you'll surpass me." The years that followed were a blur of victories and late nights. I won a landmark case protecting the rights of abandoned teens, and local newspapers called me the runaway lawyer. It was meant as a headline. To me, it was a medal. By the time Liam graduated high school, we'd moved into a modest apartment overlooking Lake Michigan in Chicago. The view wasn't much, just the shimmer of city lights reflected on dark water, but to us, it was freedom. That night, sitting on the balcony with takeout pizza and cheap sparkling cider, Liam looked at me and said, "You did it, Mom. You made a life out of nothing." I laughed. "No, kiddo, we did." He'd just been accepted to medical school. When I told him I couldn't afford the tuition, he smiled. "You gave me everything I need, Mom. I'll figure it out." And he did scholarships, work study, relentless drive. He was my mirror, my proof that love real, hard-earned love, could rebuild what cruelty tried to destroy. Sometimes, I'd get letters from women across the country, mothers who watched my interviews, girls who'd left abusive homes. They'd write, "Your story made me believe I could survive too." And if you're watching this right now, maybe you're one of them. You might not know it, but your view, your comment, your simple act of staying till the end, it turns stories like mine into lifelines for someone else. You don't just watch, you help rebuild. It had been 20 years since that door slammed behind me. I thought I'd buried that night forever until my assistant buzzed through the intercom one Tuesday afternoon. "Miss Crawford, there's an older couple here to see you." They said it's urgent. I almost told her to send them away. Then she added, "Their last name is Crawford." My heart stopped. When they stepped into my office, I barely recognized them. My father's once black hair was snow white, his back slightly hunched. My mother's designer clothes couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. For a split second, the little girl in me wanted to run, then the woman I'd become told her to stay. "Alina," my mother whispered, her voice quivering like a ghost. "You look just like you used to." I leaned back in my chair, calm but cold. "You must be mistaken. The girl you're thinking of doesn't exist anymore." My father cleared his throat. We need legal help. The church. It's being investigated for fraud. Everything's falling apart. They're trying to take our home." His voice cracked on the last word home. The same word he once weaponized to exile me. I let the silence hang heavy. You came to me for help? I asked. He looked down. You're the best attorney in the state. We had nowhere else to go. That sentence felt like lightning through my chest. For years I had dreamed of this moment revenge served ice cold. Yet, as they sat there, fragile and desperate, all I felt was a strange ache. They didn't know my son Liam, now a medical student at Northwestern. They didn't know the nights I cried myself to sleep in bus stations or the winters I spent alone, building the woman they now begged to save them. I walked around my desk and stood beside the window overlooking the city. You know, I said quietly, when you threw me out, you told me I'd ruined your reputation. Turns out, I built mine from the ruins you left behind. My mother began to cry softly. We're sorry, Alina. We were scared. We didn't know how to face it. I turned to her. You didn't know how to love me. That's the truth. For a long moment, the room was silent except for her sobs and the sound of the city below. Then my father said, almost whispering, Please, we just need one more chance. I thought about all the nights I prayed for them to say those words. Now that they had, it didn't feel like victory, it felt like closure. I'll review your case, I said finally, my tone steady. But not for you. For the innocent people your choices hurt. When they left, I stood alone in the office, my reflection caught in the glass. The same face they once rejected now looked back at me strong, unshaken, untouchable. And if you're still watching, maybe you've faced your own ghosts too. Maybe the people who once broke you have come crawling back. Remember this. You don't have to scream to win. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. The next morning, I sat in their court. My parents sat a few rows behind me, heads bowed, surrounded by the same whispers that once followed me through high school halls. The case was brutal. Years of mismanaged funds, signatures forged by church trustees, and my father's name at the center. I could have let it all collapse. I could have stood by and watched the empire that exiled me burn to ashes. But I didn't. I took their defense on one condition. I'll represent you, I told my father. But I won't lie for you. I'll protect the truth, not your pride. He nodded slowly, shame cutting deeper than any verdict could. For weeks I fought. Not for them, but for the innocent church members who'd trusted them. Every word I spoke in court echoed through the same kind of walls that once judged me. I wasn't just defending a case, I was reclaiming the right to exist. During closing arguments, I looked at the jury and said, Redemption isn't about who deserves it, it's about who chooses it. When the verdict came guilty for 2 trustees, leniency granted for my father, the room erupted. My mother wept into her hands. My father turned toward me, whispering, Why did you help us after what we did? I met his eyes, steady and calm. Because you taught me judgment, I said, but my son taught me grace. What he didn't know was that Liam had been volunteering at the hospital where my father would soon be treated. A week later, he called me, voice trembling. Mom, Grandpa's heart is failing, he needs a transplant match. And fate cruel, poetic fate, decided Liam was the match. When I told him the truth, that this man once threw me out into the snow, Liam looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, Then I'll save him. Because we don't carry their hate, Mom, we end it. The surgery was long. I sat in the waiting room, shaking, remembering that night 2 decades ago when I'd begged for mercy at the same age Liam was now. This time, mercy had a new face. My son's. When my father opened his eyes after surgery, Liam stood beside his bed, smiling weakly. You're going to be okay, he said. My father couldn't speak, just cried, silent tears that spoke a lifetime of regret. That day, I realized revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers through forgiveness and leaves a louder echo than anger ever could. If you're still watching, maybe you've carried pain that's turned heavy in your heart. Maybe you've dreamed of revenge. But remember, real power isn't proving them wrong. It's proving you healed. 6 months later, I stood in the back pew of my father's rebuilt church. The walls were new, the windows brighter, but I could still feel the ghost of the night they cast me out. The same door I'd walked through barefoot in the snow now opened into light. My father stood at the pulpit, voice trembling not with anger this time, but humility. He spoke to a full congregation. Once I judged my own child for carrying life. I thought I was protecting our name, but I was destroying it. Today, I thank the daughter who saved mine. People turned their heads toward me. I didn't hide. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because this wasn't about victory, it was about closure. After the service, he came to me slowly. A hand pressed to his chest where Liam's heart now beat within him. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said. I shook my head gently. You don't need to earn it, just don't waste it. Les. We stood there for a moment, two broken lives rebuilt by the one child they once rejected. When Liam arrived, still in his white medical coat, my father's eyes filled again. You gave me back my life, he whispered. Liam smiled. No, Grandpa. Mom gave us both one. That night, we walked along Lake Michigan, the city lights flickering across the water. I thought of the 17-year-old girl who had nothing but a grocery bag and a heartbeat inside her. She had no idea that heartbeat would one day save lives, hers, her father's, maybe even others who watched her story and found courage in their own. I turned to Liam and said, Do you ever think about how we got here? He nodded. All the time. You taught me that being thrown away doesn't mean you're worthless, it means you're free to start over. And in that quiet, I finally let go of everything I'd carried for 20 years, the shame, the pain, the need to prove myself. I realized I'd already won the moment I stopped fighting to be seen and started living to make others seen. So if you're still here, watching till the end, this part belongs to you. Because every person who listens, who feels, who comments, I've been there too, you become part of the healing. You turn these stories from pain into purpose. Revenge isn't always a roar, it's the soft sound of a life rebuilt so beautifully that even the past bows down. That, when the lights fade and the courtroom is empty, when the applause dies and the world moves on, what remains is the quiet. That quiet used to scare me. Because for years, silence meant shame. It meant remembering the slam of that door, the cold air biting my skin, and the echo of my father's voice telling me I was nothing. But now silence feels different. Now it's peace. I learned that revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about refusing to let what they did define who you become. It's about taking every cruel word, every tear, every lonely night, and using it as a brick to build something no one can take from you. I rebuilt my life from ashes. I rebuilt my heart from the pieces they shattered. And in doing so, I didn't just win, I transformed. Because true revenge isn't destruction. It's resurrection. When I look at Liam, I don't see a reminder of pain. I see the proof that love can grow even in the soil of rejection. He became the bridge between who I was and who I chose to be. And maybe that's what all of us are doing, turning our broken stories into something that lasts longer than the hurt. Some people rebuild houses. Some rebuild families. I rebuilt myself. And maybe you're doing that too, quietly, bravely, without applause. If you're watching this right now, maybe your story isn't about revenge either. Maybe it's about survival. Maybe it's about grace. Maybe it's about finally saying, they didn't win. I did. You see, the greatest power isn't in getting even, it's in getting better. Because when you heal, you take back everything they tried to steal. So tonight, when you turn off this video and the world gets quiet again, remember this. You're not alone. You're part of a tribe of survivors, people who've been kicked down, cast out, and still found a way to rise. I'm not telling this story for pity. I'm telling it because someone out there is standing in the snow right now, wondering if they'll ever be warm again. And maybe, just maybe, my story is the spark that helps them find their way home. Revenge by rebuilding means choosing to rise so high that even your scars look like constellations. It means your success doesn't scream, I hurt you back. It whispers, you never broke me. And that whisper? It's louder than any storm they ever threw at you. If this story reached something deep in you, comment, I'm rebuilding too. Because somewhere, someone needs to see your light to keep walking. This is Revenge HouseUSA, where every wound becomes wisdom, and every ending is just another beginning.